Afternoon, welcome to the double pivot. It's just myself, Kieran, FPL Discomfort today, and really, reason why I'm doing this, I just put out a thread on Brighton and Fabian Hersler. A manager I was super keen to see what he'd do in the Premier League after the accomplishments he had with St. Pauli last season in the second division in Germany, Bundesliga. And really, the concerns around what would he be able to bring to the Premier League and what would he be able to do with Brighton because it is a significant step up. So what I thought I'd do is kind of bring to light a few examples of what I've seen from Brighton under Hersler and what I think we can continue to see moving forward. Going to do this by kind of running through some of the games, a few different images throughout, where hopefully we can kind of paint a bit more of that picture. So, look, up first, we're going to kind of dive into the first game that they had, which was their game up against Everton. 3-0 victory, and Brighton steadily built up pressure here. So, if we kind of look at the visualizations on the left here, it's the XG and the XT, the X rep. So, the pressure led to the 3 goals really for them. Everton were limited in opportunities, and really sort of Brighton just continued to push that advantage home. I think on the right hand side, what's really important to look at is the way that Brighton progressed the ball. So we had the defence, their central defenders in Van Heck and Webster. They were key to progressing the ball, particularly via carries, while Matoma and Minzer, they helped transition Brighton into attacking phases. Pedro and Dunk also contributed through their passing. So really, it's sort of that versatility that Brighton offer in terms of that ball progression. So here I'm going to take a look at sort of the press Brighton administered, again with João Pedro being key. Early on, I had my own questions about whether or not he was the right player in a Hersler system because Hersler does want his attackers to press, and it is a role that requires a lot of running and a lot of energy throughout. You kind of can't dip, and there were concerns last year about whether or not Pedro had that in him. From the first game, he kind of demonstrated it perfectly. So from João Pedro's press, Brighton win possession, and immediately you can see here on the left-hand side that Mittoma's changed direction. He's already making a run in behind. Brighton already have 2 to 3 players ahead of the ball, and they're in a position to quickly put pressure on that Everton goal. Now, Welbeck, due to the wide players creating that kind of space and those options there, he chooses to continue to just carry the ball forward, um, really with that kind of space afforded to him. Now, a bit later on in the game, Brighton again win possession and immediately they look to counter. Both wingers again are pushing wide, whilst Welbeck's made a run centrally here. Minter receives the ball on the right hand side and he takes on his defender, and we can kind of see that the position of Mitoma over on that left hand side, we can see he's on the blind side of that defender. And as that ball comes across, he is there to tap that one home for Brighton to get that goal. Now, Brighton aren't just limited to kind of fast breaks using their fast players. They also demonstrate other ways to do it. So here we've got an example of sort of having these excellent passing centre backs in Van Heck and Dunk. So here we've got a ball from deep, bypasses the entire Everton team, and it led to Ashley Young being in a position where he had to sort of drag back, miss a denial of a clear goal scoring opportunity, and taking an early bath in return. And look, it was kind of relentless in this game. So Adingra came on because Minter had a concussion substitution, and he finds acres of space on the right hand side as Brighton again sort of counter and attack with pace. Now, with Adingra as opposed to Minter, early on we saw Minter go wide and put that ball across the middle. Adingra chooses to cut inside, and really that opportunity is afforded to him because of the variety of the attackers that we can kind of see around here, and Everton really don't know what to do. So yeah, that kind of runs us through that game. Now, in the next game, they were up against Man United, and Brighton effectively used half space in zone 14, so that's kind of that area just outside the penalty box, really to create those dangerous attacks. So they had 33 half space passes compared to United's 19, and Mitoma and Pedro were sort of key again in breaking United's defensive lines. In terms of the territory control, Brighton's controlling possessions concentrated around that half space and that central midfield. So again, Pedro and Welbeck are occupying the important roles for that build-up, and then Milner and Mitoma were sort of really vital in pressing out of possession. And again, that's a trait that we're seeing from Hersler. He really expects every player to press and have a really, really high press. So if you go over and look at the thread, and I'll post this video onto the thread and vice versa, but it kind of shows what their press is like compared to other players. And also I kind of demonstrated on there about Minter in particular. So Minter averages in the 94th percentile for tackles, 94th percentile for interceptions, 98th percentile for blocks, 87th for clearances, and 89th for aerials won, which is just it's ridiculous for a wide player there. Now, look, if we're going to highlight positives of the way that Brighton play, I think it's also worth kind of the vulnerabilities that they have. So really with it, Brighton against Man United, they often allowed them to get into these half spaces and sort of in behind their defence into quite dangerous areas. In this example, it was only really that sort of poor finish from Diallo, semi-difficult chance, but he's wide open here, that prevented punishment. And actually, later on in the game, they were way too narrow. We can kind of see here there's about 7 Brighton players, all very, very narrow, affording that width really to Man United. And again, it was only a player not looking along the line and being offside that kind of prevented further damage. I think Brighton will be hoping that with Ferdi Kadioglu and Estupiñán being fit and back in the team, that they should be able to improve in those areas. Now, look, as mentioned, João Pedro really silenced any critics or any concerns about his work rate and flexibility in a Hursley team. But against United, he was also fantastic. So here we see him receive the ball out wide, and he puts in an absolutely incredible cross into that area of uncertainty. I'm just going to click back and forth between it, but it's an unreal ball there. Now, we can see on this image here that with the volume of the players challenging for the cross, it affords Mitoma to kind of be wide open on that left-hand side, where he retrieves that ball, and he's then putting it back into a space with 3 teammates all inside the 6-yard box, all waiting to pounce and just tap it into the empty net, which Danny Welbeck was very happy to do so. Now, look, it's a João Pedro show in this game. Again, he demonstrated elements that make this team so exciting and so difficult to defend against. He takes the ball from within his own half here, and he uses these runs from his teammates as decoys to kind of divert attention away from him, and he carries the ball all the way to the edge of the United area. Now, he threads the ball through here for actually Milner being the furthest forward to kind of run on behind the defender, who he puts it past Onana, and it's actually a fantastic goal line clearance from Dalot that prevented really a fantastic goal from Brighton, and one showing that with a variety of options when you break, when you often go wide, it then allows you to sometimes just hold on to the ball and go centrally. And look, Brighton just continued to press against United. Again here, they quickly turned defence into attack with 3 forwards, pretty much covering the entire width of the pitch, which is a nightmare for opponents, especially if their fullbacks do overcommit. Now, Brighton also put in a pretty cracking performance against Arsenal. We can say, how was it sort of 10 against 11, and do we take that into consideration? But I think really for me, what stood out was the difference between the two teams when they win the ball high in the opponent's area off the pitch. So both teams won possession 6 times in that opponent very high in the opponent's area, but Brighton turned those 6 wins of possession into 3 shots. Arsenal had none. Now, this first image here is going to look a little bit misleading when you first look at it, because you could think that it's Arsenal attacking, but no, this was actually them playing out from the back through the Brighton press. It's kind of frightening to see how many players there are in Arsenal's defensive third at this moment. And sort of, further examples here. So between these 2 images, just in this press, we can kind of see how they do ask every player to press and press very high. Now, as we saw in the Everton game, Brighton do look to hit teams quickly through different approaches. Against Arsenal, the goal actually comes from an unreal pass through the middle for Minter to run onto. Reyes saves it, and it's deflected into Pedro's pass, who kind of tucked it home. But we can see from this image here, just that pass through all of the movement that their players have done, they've dragged the Arsenal players out of position, and it's enabled Minter to kind of just run into this space in behind effectively, but sort of into a really weird area. You're not going to see this for Arsenal very frequently, where there'll be that kind of a space. But Brighton created it and they exploited it. Now, despite playing against 10 men, Brighton did leave themselves over to counters. And this high press is great, but as we can see here, if a team breaks it, then they're away. And we can kind of see Arsenal had a chance to go away and win this game. They didn't, but again, it is that danger of having that many players surrounding the opposition, that if they can get through it, particularly if you overcommit your fullbacks, then you are leaving yourself in a very difficult situation. Now, look, the Ipswich game may have been sort of a little bit quieter or disappointing from a result perspective, but it did for me, highlight how much Brighton missed João Pedro. It was quite significant, right? And it can be seen from several key metrics and tactical insights around this game. So I guess to kind of talk through it, if we go through ball progression and influence in key areas, in the games where João Pedro played, especially against Man U and Arsenal, his role in advancing through zone 14 and half spaces was sort of pivotal. His ability to drop between the lines, and if we look back through some of those images I showed, he's connecting that play, he's contributing towards this high X threat. And we can see him in sort of the zone 14 and half space diagrams and the impact when he's playing and when he's not. Now, without him against Ipswich, Brighton's passing network and progressive passes struggled to replicate the same sort of incisiveness. The passing network against Ipswich was sort of notably less structured. And again, that's to be expected when a player who's central, not just in terms of physical position, but in terms of actually the way the manager wants to play the game, when they're missing, it is going to show less structure, lack of sharp movement through these sort of central zones. Now, as I mentioned, he continually contributes towards their threat, either by creating that space or directly influencing attacking moves. And really, against Ipswich, their XG of 1.64, it's decent, but it lacked that sharp spikes that we saw in some of the other games that Pedro's involvement usually causes. Now, that really kind of meant that the build-up was steady, but the penetration into the final third and the central zones just wasn't as effective. That crossed into the pressing and the turnovers, right? And that pressing of João Pedro really is key for them and a crucial part of Brighton's high turnovers and transitions in earlier matches. So without his pressing contributions, as reflected in sort of those metrics from the Arsenal and Man U games and the turnovers, Brighton forced fewer dangerous turnovers high up the pitch against Ipswich. Ipswich lost possession in less dangerous zones compared to the other oppositions for Brighton, which kind of does suggest and demonstrate that it lacked that usual bite that Pedro brings to it. And then in previous games, Pedro was also involved in the shot creating actions and progressive carries, both of which dropped in the Ipswich game. Brighton struggled to create through the centre and they relied way more on the wide areas, which then limits that direct threat in front of goal. And again, as I was saying, when you kind of have those options to either go wide or centrally, defenders don't know what to do. If you're only going wide, it just makes it a little bit easier for them. Now, here I just want to talk a little bit about Brighton's efficiency in the high press. So as we can see in the chart here, Brighton's positioned among the best pressing teams in the league alongside Spurs and Liverpool. And that kind of confirms that Hurstler's pressing system is not just intense, but also effective. So it forces turnovers in key areas and it limits the opposition's build-up completion. Their high ranking on both of these axes, the opponent build-up completion percentage and the danger zone possessions lost, underlines how well they disrupt play early on, and that ties directly into the success in limiting the opponent's ability to progress with that ball into dangerous areas. As we saw from a few of the images, that's not without risks against United and Arsenal. We did see them able to beat that. But then also the danger zone pressing, so sort of that ability to force danger zone possession losses really does highlight their domination in the midfield and the attacking third areas, and that complements that narrative around the high turnovers and the success of sort of creating these chances. And again, we've kind of seen it. Now, teams like Bournemouth may press high, but they're less effective in terms of sort of forcing the turnovers in the final third. So Brighton are kind of getting that balance right. Now, look, I've just got a couple more slides to run through here. And again, it is talking about that press. So here is an example of Minter doing the press, and we can kind of see just following the player through. But the player that I really want to speak about on the press side of things is actually Carlos Baleba. Now, I think Carlos Baleba is an absolutely incredible player. He has been so effective, and we're really only just at the start of what he's capable of, in my opinion. So, look, an example I'm kind of going to give here is just to demonstrate his speed, his physicality, his drive, his potential. Right now, this was the game against Wolves in the Cup, but in this first image, I kind of want you to look, and I've put a circle deliberately around Baleba, and we can see here at this moment when the ball is being passed, there is no Baleba, right? If I click along, ball's not really gone much further, right? And he's there. And if we look at that distance, the ball is still inside the area, Baleba's a long way away. Just going to move it along slightly, ball's just outside, but he slowed down the distance quicker than that ball. And before the players even received it, Baleba is there, already putting pressure on. He wins it back. And what happens next was just an absolutely incredible goal, and we can kind of see him, all the power he has, taking himself pretty high off the ground as he strikes this ball, and it does nestle into the bottom corner. So that was his first goal for Brighton. Now, look, there is a lot more to come from Brighton, and I think we are still at the early stages. But I really thought putting this video out, just a quick 15-minute one to kind of show what we've seen in the games, rather than just putting up stats and here is this player, etc., can kind of help us look at how they play moving forward and kind of pay a bit more attention to some of the future games, because this is a team that's unbeaten and they've had, Man United, Arsenal, and they're unbeaten. So games coming up for them. They are an exciting team. They've got players coming into the squad like Kadioglu, like Estupinian returning, and all kinds of other players that we've not seen, like Matt O'Reilly's injured. Russo should get some game time. Evan Ferguson should have some minutes in there. Welbeck's just been fantastic, and he can't go anywhere yet. So really, it's been a testament to Hörsler, to all the players they've got at Brighton. They've had a fantastic start, and I'm excited to see where they'll go. Thanks a lot for watching, and hopefully you'll join us for one of our streams on Thursdays. We typically go live on about 9:30, 10 o'clock. So, yeah, jump in, join us for a live chat where we'll analyze the games before and kind of talk about what we see in the next games. And please like, subscribe, and share this video. Thanks a lot. Have a good weekend.